So hi, everyone. Welcome to our the first Mupadig call of 2022, which means we are starting on year 3 of Mupadig, and we are absolutely delighted that you're all here today with us. Just a reminder, this session will be recorded. It is recording now, and this will be posted on our YouTube channel very soon after it's completed. We want to remind you, if you're not already part of our mailing list, we hope you'll sign up so that you can get reminders for upcoming calls. We promise not to spam you. And we also just want to remind people, mute your audios, all of the usual boilerplate that we're all aware of for these calls by now, because we've been on Zoom a lot. Today, we're really excited to be able to focus today on a presentation from the Nelson-Atkins Museum of Art. We have here Brigid Boyle, Stephanie Alger, and Meghan Gray, who will be here to present on different aspects of the French Paintings and Pastels 1600 to 1945 collections of the Nelson-Atkins Museum of Art catalog. This was a Quire publication that actually launched about a year ago. And so in addition to learning more about the project, we're going to have the opportunity to hear more about how they've planned for a sustainable workflow of iterative launches and adding new material and new entries as the project has matured. We're going to hear about the work that goes into that. And ideally, we're going to also learn about museum strategies for publication and publicity and what they've learned about their readers going forward. Following the presentations, we're going to have time for Q&A, and then right at the end, we'll come back in and give a little wrap-up summary of information that came in from our group survey. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Meghan Gray to get us started. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thank you especially to the Mupadig team, Emily, Katie, Greg, and Lauren for inviting us. My name is Meghan Gray, and I am Curatorial Associate in European Paintings and Sculpture and the project manager for the Nelson-Atkins first digital publication. Its long title is French Paintings and Pastels, 1600 to 1945, the collections of the Nelson-Atkins Museum of Art. But we affectionately call it the French Paintings Catalog. For those of you who have never been to the Nelson-Atkins, I'll give a brief introduction. We are an encyclopedic museum located in Kansas City, Missouri. Over the last 88 years, we have amassed a small but important collection of French paintings that was made greater by the gift of the Marion and Henry Block collection of 29 Impressionist and Post-Impressionist masterpieces in 2015. This gift transformed the museum by broadening the scope of late 19th century and early 20th century art, bringing the museum's collection to a total of 110 paintings and pastels dating between 1600 and 1945. Collection highlights include masterworks by Nicolas Poussin, François Boucher, Elisabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun, Gustave Courbet, Edouard Manet, Claude Monet, Berthe Morisot, and Vincent van Gogh, among others. As you know, a primary goal of publishing a collection catalog online is to bring the entire corpus of those works to visitors and scholars worldwide. But it also provides an opportunity for deep research into the history of each work of art, including its ownership history, technical study, and complete listing of exhibitions and bibliographic references where it has been featured. Now, I want to give a quick shout out to these generous institutions. A project like the French Paintings Catalog would have been impossible without the ongoing assistance of the Marion and Henry Block Family Foundation, a grant at the beginning of the project from the National Endowment for the Arts, a recent grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and a small but significant grant from the Crest Foundation that helped kickstart the production of the digital publication. The French Paintings Catalog launched to the public a year ago on February 26, 2021, as a serial publication. Since then, we have published curatorial and technical essays, provenance, exhibition history, and publication history on over 24 paintings or pastels. We published 2 more paintings on the last Friday of the month, what we call French Paintings Friday. In today's presentation, you will hear more from Stephanie Alger about the details of how we manage a serial publication, and from Brigid Boyle as she walks you through the final product and its digital features. But first, I'd like to lay some groundwork on how the French Paintings catalog came to fruition. Following on the heels of other Nelson-Atkins printed collection catalogs, the idea for the French Paintings catalog germinated in 2008. That was the year the museum engaged an outside conservation scientist to assist with technical analysis, and they hired a part-time project assistant, yours truly, to research the collection. The intent was for the catalog to be a print publication and to follow a prescribed format. It would contain 1 or 2 introductory essays, full-page color images of the chosen artworks, and scholarly entries accompanied by a small number of black and white comparative figures. And then there was OSCI, the online scholarly catalog initiative, launched in 2009 that challenged museums to rethink the way they were publishing. This pushed the Nelson-Atkins to explore the benefits and feasibility of a digital book as well. At first, the museum thought that they would save money. Haha. As we have learned, even with a free digital platform, there is still the significant cost of staff and contractor time. That said, the book would be widely available to more people, and we were optimistic about selective updates and a flexible publication timeline, which you'll get to hear more about soon. Over the next several years, while research on the collection continued, we watched and learned from the OSCI participants and others who published digital museum catalogs. In 2017, we were fortunate to connect with Greg Albers at Getty, and we began to beta test Quire, an open source publishing tool created by Getty and available on the code sharing site GitHub. People tend to be surprised when they hear that the Nelson-Atkins does not have a publications department and that this entire project runs out of the curatorial department. So I thought I would tell you a little bit more about how we function. Over the years, our team grew from a core of 4 within the curatorial division to a group of 12, including the senior curator, who is the project director, 3 curatorial researchers, 3 conservators plus a conservation scientific advisor, 2 software developers in the IT department, the project manager, myself, and digital publishing assistant. It also takes a village of interns, volunteers, contract authors, and editors to conduct the research and writing. I'm pleased to hear that the Getty recently published a sample Quire workflow, which I think will be very helpful to many folks. And here's a quick overview of how our team at the Nelson-Atkins works. At the center is the product owner, the person's responsible for keeping the project moving forward, which in our case is the senior curator and me. As you can see, many of the tasks overlap with each other and various positions handle various tasks. The digital publishing assistant position was key for getting the digital publication off the ground. Now, while we have support from our IT department, we quickly realized that we would need someone with technical skills who could really devote time to this project. The CREST Digital Resources Grant allowed us to hire Stephanie as the digital publishing assistant. And in that role, she converts and uploads Word documents and image files to our digital publication platform, troubleshoots and rectifies issues in the code, and generally makes the book come to life. With CREST funds, we also contracted with a digital developer, Michael Taggart, to enhance Quire with special features, with the ultimate goal of sharing it with the Quire community. In the first phase, we focused on creating a side-by-side image viewer, which you can see there on the left. In a physical book, you often must flip back and forth through pages to compare images. But in this book, you can now choose to view the text beside one image or 2 images side by side. We also added the ability to remove image captions for ease of fully viewing images. As we were testing the platform, we realized that it would benefit some readers to adjust their text to image ratio. So you can see Michael added a button which can be clicked and dragged to adjust the size of the image viewer and the text. In the second phase, we added a dynamic timeline that juxtaposes the history of Kansas City with that of the Nelson-Atkins. Users can click on the black and orange arrows to see larger versions of the thumbnail images and more detailed captions. For instance, the first event in the Nelson-Atkins column is illustrated by this rare surviving portrait of Mary Atkins, one of the original donors for whom the museum was named. Further down, readers learn that 1933 was a landmark year for Kansas City, as it gained both a public university and an art museum within the span of 2 months. The timeline also highlights significant purchases and donations of French art, in particular, the gift from the Bloch family in 2015. Here you see staff and board members applauding as Henry Bloch formally hands over his collection to the Nelson-Atkins a month before his 93rd birthday. Ease of navigation for catalog readers became a key concern. We discovered after inputting all 110 paintings and pastels that the book was pretty large and that people might need help navigating it. In consultation with Michael, we decided to add a sort of art history timeline. At the bottom of each section landing page, you'll find that timeline, which shows the eras covered in the publication. Clicking on one of those eras takes you to that section's landing page. We also asked Michael to create a way for readers to easily see which paintings or pastels had been fully published, since not everything would be published all at one time. When you open the popover menu by clicking the triple horizontal bar, or the hamburger menu, in the upper right corner, you can see a list of all objects, which are arranged chronologically by artistic movement, and then alphabetically by artist's last name within those subcategories. With Michael, we decided to add a page icon beside the paintings that are fully published. This helps readers to visually identify the paintings that have entries and full content. Overall, we're really pleased with the result of our special features, but as you might expect, everything has not always been smooth sailing. We've had our challenges. Now, for one, the Quire project requires knowledge that not all digital developers have. It was difficult to find a contractor that was familiar with Hugo, the open source static site generator upon which Quire is built. We've also had to understandably realize that we can't get the same level of troubleshooting assistance once the contract is over. But I must say that Greg and Aaron are so kind in helping us fix problems that come up with our customizations. One portion of publishing digitally that has been especially advantageous is the serial launch. As you must have gathered, the project started in 2008, which means that when we launched last year, we had been researching these paintings for 12 years. So understandably, the institution was pretty antsy to go to press, but we still had more research to do, if you can believe it. So by publishing in installments, we are able to continue to perform deep research while simultaneously publishing content that is ready. It also allows us to target our audiences on one day a month, French Paintings Friday, while many other projects and objects get their moment in the sun on other days. Brigid is going to share more about the benefits of publishing digitally, but first, I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues who's been invaluable to this project, Stephanie Alger. Stephanie?
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Alger, digital publishing assistant here at the Nelson-Atkins. My job involves adding content and features to Quire, liaising with IT, and maintaining the live and various staging sites for the catalog. As Megan mentioned, the catalog is published in a monthly cycle, 2 entries every month on the last Friday of the month. I'm going to talk a little bit about what publishing in installments means in terms of features that we had to implement and what the monthly cycle of work looks like to get ready for publication day. We made the decision to publish in installments pretty early on, but we still weren't sure exactly what those installments looked like or how we were going to solve some inevitable issues that come from publishing in portions. We had to ask ourselves questions like, how much information do we provide initially? Do we just give page titles and images, tombstone information, publication date? Or do we only publish a page once the entry is written? And if we are putting all the incomplete pages up, how do we designate to users which pages are fully published? Ultimately, we landed on publishing all of the pages with just their title, main image, tombstone information, and expected publication year to give our users a sense of the breadth of the publication and how large it's going to be when complete in 2025, but at the same time, not requiring us to have detailed information on every object. There were a couple of problems that we ran into after making that decision. Most importantly, how will the users know which pages are complete versus which ones only have that base tombstone information? We came up with two solutions that work together to help our users navigate to fully published articles. The first solution is the publication installments page, an ongoing list of every published entry by date of publication. We try and direct people to this page when they first come to the catalog through a link on the cover page. Our hope is that this list is a less overwhelming and more informative way of browsing the catalog than just scrolling through the publication page by page. The second solution for how to indicate fully published entries is a little bit more of a visual marker for users who are browsing the publication through the table of contents. This icon appears in the table of contents and in the menu next to each entry page title that has been fully published. We implemented the icon using code written by our contract developer, Michael, who Megan talked about earlier. The code uses a new line in the entry page heading, which is a true-false indicator of completeness for each page. When we're ready to publish a page, I switch this false to true, and the icon appears next to the title of the page in the table of contents and the menu. While we originally spent a lot of time focusing on how to make sure our users are able to navigate to fully published entries, we also realized we needed an easy and clear way to inform users that a page they've landed on is incomplete. The solution we came up with was using that same true-false code to print a line of text on unpublished pages, giving users an expected publication date, which is also pulled from the page metadata. The code I wrote for this feature allows for a month, day, year format, but we ultimately landed on using just the year to allow for minor scheduling changes over time. Which brings us to this, our monthly timeline. All in all, each publication batch of 2 entries takes about 2 months from start to finish. This timeline starts after the content is finalized by our authors and editors. The process I use when working in Quire will sound familiar to some who have heard Greg or Aaron or other Quire users speak, but it starts with converting the Word documents I get from Megan and our conservation department into code using an independent program. Once the documents have been converted, I add the text to the Quire platform and add custom code to format the text into the collapsible sections Brigid will talk about later, add hover footnotes, glossary terms, and insert images into the body of the text. I take those formatted pages and push them using Git, a versioning software, onto a new branch in our GitLab repository named after the month it will be published. The current branches on the project are February, which will go live on Friday, March, which will publish next month, and April, which I just made in preparation for receiving new documents next week. I also have a few branches in this repository for features I'm working on or ideas I'm testing out. Since our project is so large, I wasn't surprised when we ran into a storage space issue on GitLab a few months back, mostly because of the large number of image files and PDF downloads we store online. This meant we had to rework the way our Git projects were organized, which ultimately led to us splitting up our single repository into a series of repositories. The main one being the one on the screen. This repository holds the contents, such as the entry pages and essays, the metadata for the publication and information on images, and the theme files, which determine how the publication looks and functions. But we don't upload any of the static images or PDF downloads to this repository. Those files have been separated out for their own project to save space. We also have individual repositories for the site files for each separate staging site where I upload files for IT to put on our website. After the files are converted and formatted and pushed to GitLab, I tell Meghan that they're ready to review. She goes through and makes copy edits directly in the project, adding code I missed, clearing up any remaining questions, and editing the punctuation and text as needed. Having curatorial staff that feels comfortable using Git and editing within the publication is one of the best things to come from me starting on this project so early. In the summer of 2019, I taught the basics of coding and working in Quire to the whole European curatorial department. The class was 10 weeks, and it mainly started so Meghan and other French Paintings catalog staff could learn about the tasks I did to prepare entries for publication in hopes that they would be making their own edits. Ultimately, Meghan and I decided that the workflow would be most efficient if we were the only people working in the project, but I highly recommend, if you are going to embark on a Quire project, training your editor in at least the basics so they're able to work in the files directly. It's such a time saver to have her able to make edits directly without the cycle of building staging sites and making changes until it's ready for other internal and external editors. The rest of the process of preparing entries is pretty self-explanatory. We send the staging site to our internal team, we make their edits and rebuild the site to send to contract editors. Once we get the editor's notes incorporated into the project, we consider the site to be complete. At this point, we only make changes to the current month if they're urgent. Well, so we say, but we've been known to make changes past that date. After that, I make individual PDFs, edit the full publication PDF, purchase any new DOIs, and make any other final changes before building the site and sending the files to IT. We upload the site the afternoon before French Paintings Friday in case we run into any issues, and that's that. Barring unforeseen circumstances, such as not receiving essays from authors at the due date, this schedule hasn't failed us. That does beg the question though, what happens when we don't have the content on time? I'm sure many of you have experienced this as well, but with such a tight turnaround time, we've had to make some adjustments to our publication schedule in the past to accommodate authors needing more time on their entries. Usually that looks like just swapping 2 months back to back of entries to give the author another month, but we have discussed the possibilities of pushing an entry back farther than a single month. Occasionally, we have changes that need to be made to existing content. Anything inconsequential, like copy edits or adding glossary terms, don't get listed anywhere on the website. We just covertly publish them as we need to make them, either with the next big push or sometime in the middle of the month. All significant changes, however, such as painting title changes, can be found on the About page, where we list any new content we push to the live site. This is also where we add the publication date of every batch as they're published. All in all, catalog is a living, breathing object. We get suggestions for new features from readers, coworkers, and digital publishing professionals all of the time. And I am constantly working to add new functionality to the publication. That being said, we haven't made an effort to publicize any of our changes. We just kind of push them as they're finished. But two of the most recent changes we've made are the addition of an FAQ page, which involved adding a new icon next to the search button on the navigation bar, and the creation of GIFs by my digital publishing intern to help readers enhance their experience through a better understanding of the intended use of the existing features of the publication. The second long requested feature add is that of a jump to top of section button at the bottom of our longer drop-down sections, which will be live soon. A couple other features I'm working on are getting IIIF implemented and putting images on our publication installments page. But I'm always really interested in hearing everyone's ideas on new features or functionality we could add to the catalog. So please feel free to email me with your ideas for the French Paintings catalog. I also included a link here to our public GitHub where the original version of the NAMA theme is available to use on your own Quire projects if you're interested. I am in the process of updating that to include some bug fixes and new functionality like that FAQ page. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Brigid to talk about the final product, some additional features, and some of the analytics we've seen on our site.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm Brigid Boyle, Black Family Foundation Doctoral Fellow, and I'm going to pivot our discussion towards content and digital features. Each object in the catalog has its own web page. The content, as Stephanie mentioned, is organized into collapsible sections, and handy reference guides make it easy to cite each section in Chicago or MLA style. Separate digital object identifiers have been assigned to the catalog essay, technical essay, and documentation section, providing stable links that will continue to work even if the catalog URL changes. Visitors can peruse this content in two main ways. The download PDF button generates a PDF file for that particular object, which adapts to both computer screens and e-readers like iPad. You can also download a PDF of the entire catalog from the pop-out menu shown earlier. Another option is the web reader mode, which adheres to accessible design principles. Alt text has been created for the museum's collection images and will soon be available for all of our comparative figures, allowing screen readers to describe the images for non-sighted users. You can see the alt text for Renoir's Pinning the Hat at the bottom of this slide. We've also chosen foreground and background colors based on their contrast ratios, making the content more legible for people with low vision. And web evaluation tools, such as the browser extension Wave, have helped flag content that might present accessibility issues. Stephanie can share more about those tools later if anyone's interested. When using the web reader mode, users can view glossary definitions and endnotes by hovering their cursor over underlined terms and superscript numbers. So for example, here you see the pop-up definition for etching. These definitions are also organized alphabetically within the glossary itself. A big advantage of online publications, as I'm sure many of you know, is their ample storage capacity. Prior to French Paintings and Pastels, as Meghan mentioned, all of the Nelson-Atkins collection catalogs were print publications, and due to space and cost considerations, each entry in those catalogs was limited to a small number of comparative figures. Here, for example, you see a representative example from the 2007 American Paintings catalog. Apart from the color reproduction of Reginald Marsh's painting, the sole illustration is a black and white quarter-page image, which was pretty typical. By contrast, the French catalog has the luxury of numerous high-definition illustrations for each object. Some artworks have as many as 40 comparative figures, as is the case for Exit from the Theater, a genre scene attributed to Daumier. Included in that tally are photos of microscopic details, such as paint cross-sections, as well as images of verso labels and inscriptions, all things that are either invisible to the naked eye or hidden from sight. So they really enhance a physical encounter with the object. Because our catalog is not limited to a certain number of pages, we can include an exhaustive list of exhibitions and bibliographic references for every artwork, rather than citing only major retrospectives and monographs. Paul Gauguin's Fataruma, for instance, has been loaned to 41 exhibitions since its creation in 1891, and it has been mentioned in 272 academic publications written in 9 different languages, all of which are identified chronologically in the catalog. We are also able to include more detailed provenance narratives than are typical of collection catalogs, again, due to the lack of space constraints. Nearly every change in ownership is accompanied by a lengthy footnote, like the 2 shown here, directing readers to both published and archival sources, documenting those transactions. Services like Google Analytics, which allow us to evaluate web traffic in real time, have really helped us gauge the impact of our publication. Over 16,000 people have accessed the French catalog since its launch 12 months ago, amounting to an average of 50 visitors per day and yielding more than 99,000 unique page views. 66% of those users viewed the catalog on a desktop, and another 30% did so on their mobile device. 2 out of 3 users navigated to the catalog directly, while the remainder found the catalog through an organic search or a referral. Among the websites that generated referrals for us were the art newspaper, Quire, of course, Facebook, Smithsonian Magazine, and LinkedIn. 3,700 people, or 23% of our audience to date, have accessed the catalog from abroad. Our readers have hailed from 120 countries, with the United Kingdom, France, Canada, Germany, Italy, and China topping the list. Among repeat visitors, the average session duration is about 6 minutes. That might not seem like very long, but it's actually a strong metric. According to several studies, most websites report an average session duration of 2 to 3 minutes. We can also compare and contrast the traffic to different web pages within the catalog. Of the 26 French artworks released thus far, Van Gogh's Olive Trees, Manet's The Croquet Party, Poussin's The Triumph of Bacchus, Monet's Boulevard des Capucines, and Boucher's Landscape with a Watermill have proved the most popular. Over 3,300 people have perused the Olive Trees webpage alone, and roughly 1,500 users have visited each of the other 4 paintings. This type of data is immensely helpful to us as we continue to release new material and improve the catalog's features. Due to its serial nature, the French collection catalog will not be published in full until July 2025. Once that milestone is reached, the Nelson-Atkins plans to produce a print version of the catalog containing only entries on works from the Block collection, a gesture of thanks to the Block Family Foundation for its ongoing support. With a limited print run of 500, this book will be offered for sale in the museum store, which you see here. For practical reasons, only a single unabridged hard copy will be printed for the museum's library. The contents of the digital catalog would fill an estimated 2,400 pages to be split across 3 volumes of 800 pages each. Given its enormous size, it would obviously be cost prohibitive to produce a commercial print edition of the complete catalog, but we do intend to have a non-saleable copy available on site for research purposes. In-person visitors to the Nelson-Atkins are directed to the French catalog at several junctures. Freestanding banners and lollipop signs near entrances to the European galleries promote this resource and provide a QR code for easy access. Flyers in the Spencer Art Reference Library, positioned near the public printer and on a bookcase of recent publications, 2 places where visitors often linger, alert library patrons to the catalog's existence, and object labels in the galleries steer visitors to the mobile app Smartify, which provides direct links to the French collection catalog. Here you see the label for Cézanne's Quire Process, and many of you are probably familiar with Smartify, but if not, when visitors open the app on their phones and scan an artwork on display, they are brought to the Smartify webpage for that object. Each page includes tombstone info, a short description, and a hyperlink to French Paintings and Pastels. So by publicizing the catalog in a variety of ways, we seek to engage a broad spectrum of visitors, from student researchers in the library to tech-savvy millennials. Before wrapping up, we wanted to call your attention to another digital catalog that is forthcoming from the Nelson-Atkins, the Star Collection of Portrait Miniatures, 1500 to 1850. This catalog will contain the latest scholarship on 273 miniatures, and like French Paintings and Pastels, will be published serially on the Quire platform beginning in 2023. We look forward to sharing this publication with you in the near future. And And at this point, we're happy to answer any questions you might have about the project's evolution, its development, content, or features. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to the three of you for coming and sharing your project today. It's great to hear about it. Of course, as someone who works on Quire, I knew about it, have known about it for quite some time, but I learned quite a few things watching this. I had a bunch of the stuff that you've done that I hadn't caught up to, so it's really exciting. For everyone here, I'd like to invite you to ask any questions you have either in the chat or feel free to come off mute. We'll be watching over the chat and we can sort of highlight those questions, but I had a couple to start. That I'd like to put out. One of the first one I was wondering about, if you could talk a little bit about what relationship, if any, the information you're publishing in your catalog has with other publications of that information, sorry, let me reword that. On your collections pages online, like on the website, is there information about these same objects on the website and other places, or is it only in the collection? And then how also is there a relationship between the data that you're publishing in your publication with the collections database internally for your museum? Like, how are you managing all the sort of different places where this information might show up?
So the museum does have on our, we use TMS as our collections database, and so therefore we have eMuseum as our website that shows all of our collection. We do have our provenance, our exhibition history, and our bibliographic references listed on eMuseum, which again pulls from TMS, but there are no curatorial entries, there are no conservation entries. So that is something that's specific to the catalog. But all of that, that shared information, that back matter, provenance, et cetera, does have to be input in two places. So it has to go into TMS and it has to go into Quire. And it is a bit of a challenge sometimes to make sure that the two things match. Generally, when the project team is done researching an object, they put all of that straight into TMS themselves. And then when we're ready to publish, we pull it and put it into the book. And usually it hasn't changed at that point, but sometimes things do change. So yeah, it's trying to remember to check all those boxes, make sure everything matches.
Excellent. We have a question in the chat that I wanted that sort of folds into one that I had as well. Kristen Press says, I'm a department of one. How can I begin to implement this technology? Is it all or none, or is there a way to start in a one-person way? And I was thinking too, like what advice you all would have for other museums looking to start into digital publishing, whether it's a department of one or a department of 10.
I think that a department of one could absolutely use Quire for their publication. I wouldn't recommend making any changes to the platform, because the more changes you make, the farther you get from base Quire and the harder it is for sweet people over at the Getty to help you with any issues that you come up with. But as long as you learn all of the different code languages you need to work in Quire, just specifically Markdown and YAML, I think you should be able to start a publication on your own. If it's as big as ours, though, I think you definitely would need maybe a couple of other people on the team.
Stephanie, could you repeat, you said Markdown, and what was the other language?
YAML, Y-A-M-L, it's yet another markup language.
Thank you.
Yeah. You probably would also want Git, I think, to get the project from the Getty. I'm not positive about that though. There's really good instructions on the Quire website though for how to install and start implementing Quire.
And aside from the specific platform of use of Quire, what advice, like what have you all learned about digital publishing more broadly that you would want to pass on to other institutions in terms of how do they start thinking about, moving into digital? What kind of, how do they start evaluating the options as they're thinking of moving forward?
Well, I do think that OSCE follow-up guide was helpful. It talked about, I think there was 9 different lessons learned. So, you can go through those, looking around at other museums' digital publications and finding out what they have learned coming to events like this, and picking people's brains. That's all stuff that helped us as we evaluated. I mean, we also spent some time, Brigid and I, in early days, looking at publications and thinking about, we really like these features. Wouldn't it be great if we could have, this ideal combination of various features across different publication platforms, software, which is kind of how we ended up asking Michael and using our CREST funds to make some enhancements to Quire.
Well, that's similar to this other question here that we have from Rob Weisberg. It's talking about start thinking about the designer and the developer and getting them involved. He asks, how early in the process did you hire a digital designer? Did you already have a sense of your desired layout, structure of the catalog entries, features, et cetera? Or was that something that was developed after bringing in that designer and developer?
Well, part of the reason we ended up going with Quire was because it was a free static site generator. So I guess what I'm saying is there were reasons why we ended up picking Quire to begin with, which did sort of dictate the layout. I mean, it is basically, and we haven't changed it that greatly. So that really did kind of dictate where we were going to go. I would say, I mean, Stephanie, we hired you first, and you and I started building and playing and, dreaming about what it could be. And then maybe 6 months later, we started looking for a developer.
Yeah, I think I hired him maybe the spring after I was hired. And then we worked with him for a long time, 9 months maybe. And it was just kind of a slow process of like, well, could we do a feature kind of like this? And would it work maybe like this? And kind of testing things out and seeing how it kind of worked out. And a lot of him saying, no, that's absolutely not possible. And then having to kind of rethink what we would do and how we would structure and format everything.
And as I recall, you all had a list of some initial features, at least, that you were interested in, which is kind of necessary usually to approach a developer, because you need to give them a sense of what you're after to at least start the conversation. And then, it sounds like then and I've had the same experience where a developer will, something that you think is very easy will turn out to be quite hard from a development standpoint, and vice versa. Something you think might be impossible is actually quite easy in a development standpoint. So it's nice to have those conversations that then help sort of move you into different ways and come up with the features you wanted and were useful. That's great. Chris there from Minneapolis had a question. She says, I have had a little success in looping in our curators and editors to the Quire GitHub workflow. How did you get your editors on board? Stephanie, you talked a little bit about this in your talk. Can you expand a little bit more?
Well, to be fair, starting out, Meghan was like, I want to learn. I really want to understand how it works. So that was the first big step, obviously, is her wanting to do it. But yeah, just doing the repetitive classes. It was every week. We met on, I think it was Wednesday mornings. I gave them each a laptop and I sat them down and I said, we are learning how to do this today. And we just kind of walked through all of the different steps and everything. I think part of it is definitely you need to have someone who is interested in learning, but also I think explaining why it's helpful for them to understand is a big part of it. Saying like, if you are able to go into the project yourself, you can find all of these periods that are misplaced and you can fix them yourself rather than relying on me, who is not an editor and who might not have the same eye as you to make those changes. The fewer times you have to come to me and say, you messed up the punctuation, the easier it'll be on both of us. So I think explaining exactly why they should learn is probably a really good start.
I like that idea of empowering them too, to be able to, you can do it themselves and make those changes themselves. That makes sense. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, so Jennifer asked, what was the process with getting your contract freelance editors on board? How do you all manage that?
So are you talking about specifically using Quire or just finding an editor and a contractor?
Jennifer, you can either you can elaborate in the chat or online, but I would guess that it's just sort of more broadly, how do you bring people in? Oh, using Quire.
Using Quire. Well, I will say, so our contract editor is here, Jessica Ruthier. I see her, hello. She was actually also very much on board, wanted to use Quire and get in there. But Stephanie and I felt like it might be kind of difficult, honestly, to get that up and going. You know, we definitely had a willing person there that wanted to do that. So right now, she will just kind of copy places, you know, when she's editing our web pages, she'll just copy a bit of the text and say, okay, you need to make sure you add a comma here. And then I go in and find it and do it. So.
I'll add too, and from our experience at the Getty, we are starting to work with some freelance editors. I think all of our editors now have worked on a Quire project. Some of them more directly in the Markdown files, a number of them actually in the Markdown files, and have learned GitHub and have gone through the process and have been really game, which has been great. But we've also started to work with some freelance editors who have been game to do that too. And so if you're looking for, to Jennifer and anyone else, if you're looking specifically for an editor for Quire projects, we can reach out to Aaron or I, and we can give you some names. Or really an editor, you know, and I would say these people are probably also game for other kinds of digital platforms as well. I think that, you know, a person who's willing to work in a different way in one platform will probably likely be willing to do it in another platform. So we're happy to share those names too with those folks. And if you are an editor and interested in that kind of project, let us know too. We're happy to add you to the list and meet you and get to know you a little bit more. Thanks for the question. Let's see, Chad, I see a question here from Chad. He says, have you seen any interesting patterns in engagement metrics that differ between desktop and mobile sessions? Brigid, you talked about analytics a little bit. Do you have any more insight on that?
I think the session durations tend to be slightly longer on desktop than on mobile, which makes sense just given the way the catalog is structured and the depth of detail that it contains. There tends to be more navigation to successive pages as well on desktop. And we've seen a very small percentage of people using tablets to access the catalog. It's usually only 3 to 5% or something along those lines.
How much do you, when you're thinking of new features and stuff, are you testing them on mobile? It was and thinking through like how they're going to work on mobile, and what's that kind of process like for you all?
Stephanie, do you want to take that?
That's a good question. When we work on new features, we definitely absolutely look at them on mobile. We have a tendency to hope that people are going to access it through desktop, and that any issues that we come across on mobile just won't be noticed because people won't look at it there. Obviously, like Brigid shared, we do have 33% of people coming from mobile rather than desktop. So we do make sure that everything works and there's no like overlapping text or weird issues. But there are certain problems that you can't really overcome on mobile using the kind of site that we have. So yes, we consider mobile. We don't always make changes based on that though, unfortunately. When we did have Michael, he was better about, because he knows better how to make sites more friendly for mobile than I do. So his features are a little bit more functional on mobile than new ones, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Rupert has a question about image rights. Roughly what proportion of comparative images are the museum's own and what proportion are externally sourced? And were rights clearances for those externally sourced image, were they expensive or prohibitive in any way for you all? Yeah,
you can tag them too, Megan. I was just going to say most of our comparative figures are externally sourced. Would you agree with that? We've gotten very savvy, I think, at getting a lot of them from Gallica and places like that, where they charge a very nominal fee. We do, of course, get some from, Bridgman Images, Art Resource, and things along those lines. Megan, do you want to add to that?
Yes. So for the curatorial entries, we have put a limit of about 5 images for those entries, and the majority of our entries actually are detail and conservation imagery. So that is all NAMA images. So like those 40 that you saw for the Daumier, almost all of those were conservation images of the painting, or paint samples, that sort of thing. But yes, for comp figs, for the curatorial essay, we do look for image rights and do our best to find free when possible. And we can sometimes claim fair use, which is great. I think we've spent maybe $5,000 this year for comp figs. But of course that doesn't tell you how many paintings we've worked on in that time. And I'm not sure I can give that figure. So a little bit of a non-exact answer.
Yeah, that's all right. Have you, I think any little details on, when it comes to rights, any details and any sharing is helpful for folks. What did you have you run into any issues where there was just an image that you couldn't afford, or an image that was going to have too many restrictions in terms of what you could do digitally, that you had to go, go back and rethink the use of that comparative?
I don't know that we've come into anything that felt like it was too expensive, but we have had problems where we can't get a hold of anybody. Like we've asked for rights and we don't get any response. And so then we will scan the image from a book and say, we tried our best, and then we'll cite, where it had been last published.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Here's another question to go back to the sort of features and interface. This is from LACMA, from Alexander. And then the question says, just wondering how much of a factor has usability testing has played in your development of new interface features? Sorry, I misread that, but basically, are you doing usability testing as you're developing new features?
Absolutely. One of the first things that I always do when we make a new feature is I check it with that Wave Chrome extension that Brigid mentioned. It's really helpful because you click on that and it'll open kind of a panel that tells you about if there's any issues with screen readers where it'll read text out of order, or if there's any weird formatting that'll eliminate text from a screen reader. We also obviously double check everything for contrast and make sure that images have alt text, make sure that whenever there is a button that needs to be clicked, it has that as its tag, so that the screen reader will tell the user that there's a button there that you can click to get more information or whatever it is. So we absolutely always check stuff for usability. We have run into a couple of issues where it doesn't necessarily work. Yeah, the extension was Wave. Let me look to see if I can get the full one and I'll put it in the chat.
Great, thank you for that. Well, Stephanie, you're looking for that. We're sort of nearing our last few minutes here. Please keep chatting a little bit away in the last 5 minutes, but I want to pass it back to Emily. I want to say thank you. Actually, first of all, let me say thank you again to Megan and Stephanie and Brigid for coming today and sharing this project with us. I think it's an exciting one to see for me, obviously, but I think it's been great for everybody else to see it too. And I'm so glad to see it out there and see the continuing work, and looking forward to the second catalog that's going to be coming. So that's great. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. But I want to pass it back to Emily Zoss for a minute to talk a little bit about a survey that we did for the Mupu Day group that many of you participated in, and we'll wrap up the day and let you all get on with it. Emily.
Yeah, thank you. We ran this survey because we want to hear from you about what's most relevant for presentations going forward. The first question was about the types of webinars that are most useful for your work. For 70% of respondents, the preference was for focused presentations on specific topics such as accessibility, backlist conversion, individual publishing platforms. The next most frequent response was case studies of individual projects. There were a number of specific topics that people identified. The ones mentioned previously about accessibility and backlist conversion, I think are perennial. Also hybrid publications, such as we have heard today, where there are some simultaneous print and digital strategies, focus on workflow and best practices there, promotion and cataloging and indexing for how we're getting these books out into the broader scholarly ecosystem. Someone also suggested maybe having a problem session where participants can share challenges and difficulties and do a little bit of workshopping on those, which I think would be really interesting. We also asked, what would you like to see more of? And again, a lot of interest in focusing on specific platforms or tools, which is important guidance. Case studies also about fields outside of the museum world that can serve as models, looking at digital humanities, journalism, and so forth. More on ongoing analytics and reader behavior post-launch, which we got to hear some of today, which was wonderful. And also publications that are incorporating engagement and are building off of reader input in more formative ways, all of which I think would be really interesting to look at. And finally, also mentioned was encouragement to increase attention to diversity in range of presenters on all subjects. That is fair and important feedback, and we hear you on that. So thank you very much to everyone who participated in the survey. It's concrete guidance that helps shape calls that are most useful to you. This is the regular reminder that we are always actively seeking presenters for future calls. We depend on your nominations to identify presenters, schedule presenters. So please continue to contact us to volunteer yourself in a project that you're working on, recommend others that you want to hear about, or just make sure that we are hearing about the specific platforms and topics that are most interesting and useful to you. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up today. Thank you again so much to the team from the Nelson-Atkins, Meghan, Stephanie, and Brigid for your presentation. Thank you to all of you for attending and for participating in the survey. We remind you that recordings of all of our previous sessions are available on YouTube. Please make sure that you're signing up for our mailing list so that we can keep you on the list and inform you of future webinars coming up. Also reach out to our email address if you have suggestions for topics and presenters. Our next call will be Tuesday, April 26th at noon Eastern, and we hope to see you all then.